What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? Welcome to the Artists of Data Science Open Happy Hour. Super excited to have you guys here. We got the room filling up, lots of people trickling in, man. Super excited to see everyone here. Hope you guys are all doing amazing. By the way, shout out to Rihanna for supporting the farmers protest. I think that is awesome, bringing it to mainstream awareness. I know you guys have heard me talk about this once before. If you haven't already heard about the farmers protest, you need to go and read up on it. So shout out to Rihanna for bringing it to the public awareness. We pretty much got the bootleg Indian version of Donald Trump running India right now, just causing a scene. So I'm gonna just leave it at that. All right, guys, super excited to have all of you here. Welcome to the happy hour. We got Susan Walsh, we got Evangelos, we got Tom, Jennifer, Jean Sebastian, Eric, Dave Langer. Man, this is awesome, man. Super happy to see you guys here. Anybody else? If you guys want to come on and turn your camera on, I'd really appreciate that. I've made the settings so that anybody who doesn't have the camera on is suppressed. That way it kind of just keeps it nice and clean for us. What's up, everybody? How you guys doing?
I'm so hungover.
Already? Isn't it just nighttime? How can you be hungover?
Yeah, I've been hungover since this morning. I did a drunk LinkedIn Live last night as well.
How did that go?
It was quite fun.
How did I miss that, man?
George came on. George was on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh man, I gotta go back and watch that.
Oh man.
Well, I hope you're feeling better now.
Yeah. No, it's there was a lot of alcohol involved. It was like an online Zoom party.
Oh my God.
And like the LinkedIn Live was like the after party.
Dude, that sounds like a lot of fun, man. I wish I was.
No, I'm probably gonna get banned for like drunk LinkedIn Living or something. But
that's not a thing. That's not a thing.
I just made it a thing.
All right, guys. Well,
I've had pizza. I've got cookies. I'm all good now.
Oh, we're about to have a ball, man. I wish I had I should have got like a beer or something, a glass of wine. I guess it's happy hour. Should be having something. Yes, Megan's got something. What do you have there, Megan? Oh, she is inaudible. I think your microphone might be messed up. Yeah, still can't hear you, but that's okay. Get that sorted out, because if you have a question, we'd love to be able to hear you. So yeah, welcome everybody. Hey, if anybody has a question, go for it. If you want to just take over the floor and ask your question, or just type in, I have a question in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat and putting people in the queue. So if you have a question while somebody is talking, just type in, I have a question into the chat, and then I'll be sure to add you to the queue. All right, Dave, how you doing, man?
Good.
Yeah. Are you guys excited for the Dedicated conference? It's coming up in just a few days.
I need to prep.
Yeah, same here.
I haven't put my stuff together yet.
Yeah, I'm going to be working on my Well, I've been ideating on the presentation and just like mulling it over in the back of my head for quite some time. So I'll probably put pen to paper this weekend and start.
Are you doing like just a talk, or are you doing slides and talk?
It's going to be slides and talk, but the slides will be very minimal wordage, just like a word or two, just to illustrate the example. But if you haven't registered already, register, guys. It'll be a good time. And for those of you who are in the Slack community, I'm going to send a message about me doing a practice session on Wednesday. So I hope to be able to practice with you guys from the Slack community on Wednesday, just to make sure that my presentation is good. And thank you for everybody who took time to fill out the survey to help me make the presentation like as good as I could possibly make it. I really appreciate that. All right, so I don't see any questions in the chat. So if anybody has one, now is the time.
Yeah, I can go.
Yeah, definitely. Go for it.
So I've just been kind of exploring a little bit of like, I guess, feature engineering and kind of trying to dive a little deeper because I think I mean, it really can help kind of improve performance on a model and just how things come through. I was wondering if anyone had any just like good starting, I guess, feature engineering, like getting into the depth of it.
I think a good package in Python is called Feature Engine. That's a good package to get started with. But I think feature engineering in general is very um, dependent on context and dependent on what type of data you have. So when I think of feature engineering, I think of ways to unlock all the complexity that is hidden in raw data, right? So, like, if we have an example, let's say, where we have a column and that column is something like a categorical column, which has 3 levels to it, you know, I think people typically might just want to do one hot encoding or label encoding or something like that. But I think a often overlooked method that can be just as valuable is doing some type of a summary statistic encoding based on those groupings, right? So, for example, you can create new columns. If you imagine a pandas data frame and you group by that category and then come up with like summary statistics columns such as group mean, group standard deviation, group min, group max, something like that, and then merge that back in with the original data frame, you can build out some of that complexity that is in there. Tom, what do you think about feature engineering?
So my simple example I love to give to people, Austin, is let's say we're working with a stupid simple example. Okay, I think I even have a graph. I wonder if I'm not going to show my screen. But basically, let's say you've got a stupid simple example like, sorry, I don't mean to call it stupid. It's actually a great example. But your data's curved, it's parabolic, but your values are just X. Well, you're going to need an X squared to fit that. But there's no X squared among your features. So you add it, you engineer it. Well, as you get more variables and you get more possibilities, you can have quite a large, rich number of polynomials and combinations of polynomials that would add to the fit. But there's sometimes where you've got to do something strange like X squared plus Y squared just to create another dimension. For example, let's say you're doing some classification, you've got a group of dots in the middle and a ring outside. If you want to use logistic regression to separate those, you're gonna have to add X squared plus Y squared. It's really just adding another dimension, and that way you can literally draw a circle for the separation boundary between those. So it's literally engineering new features, adding functions in there that wouldn't have been there before. Does that help, Austin?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I guess you're right. Like it all really depends on the context of the data you're using. So I just wasn't sure if anyone yet like using some kind of general frameworks of like you said, you're adding another dimension. So if you have an X squared type of thing, you're going to need a Y squared or something to kind of go along with it. So just kind
and I
of
would say
differently.
Yeah, just so you know, I was speaking loosely because a lot of examples that show that particular example, they put it on edge just to show how it's essentially created a new dimension. But once you get a feel for how to engineer your own features, and I encourage doing that first or trying to do it at first, it's the same old game. Now you can go get an auto feature engineering package, but you still need to have a sense of how to reduce it down to just the additional functions. So example, well, was it X squared? Do I need X squared plus Y squared? And then if you have two variables, well, okay, maybe I should look at X squared and Y squared and XY. And well, maybe you didn't need XY. Well, how do you figure out? And it gets back down to feature reduction at that point, getting rid of the features that don't matter.
Yeah, the classic example I like to use is like, let's say you have two features in your data set. One is height, one is weight. All right. By themselves, they're points of information. But if you did something like BMI, which is a combination of those two features, you get a bit more information from that. So I uh, linked to a framework, not framework, but it's a Python package. I guess you can call it a framework called Feature Engine. And I think Dave was going to link. He did link to the book that I was about to link to as well, the Feature Engineering. I'd love to hear from Monica and Makiko. How do you guys engineer features? What are some things that you think about?
Yeah, to your point with the height and weight, I think of it more as like categories using domain knowledge in your data set. If you have a similar example I have is you have like demographic data or geographic data, and you know that if you have this zip code and your house is 2 stories, then you're middle class or something like that. That's very high level. There's lots of other things that are involved, of course, but I think of it more of a categorical type way.
Makiko, and then we'll hear from Dave.
Yeah, so the way I would approach it is like kind of go from like min max effort, right? So you go after the low hanging fruit features, which are the ones that are existing, and like the way I would kind of like approach it is like, let's say you just don't know anything, right, about the data set, because let's be honest, you can get a data set, people can say, this column means this and this column means that, and oh, this column should never be null, it should never have negatives, and we've all had experience where it's like, you're a damn dirty liar, right? So low-hanging fruit sort of effort first. So the first thing I would do is do some kind of like, I don't want to say a group chart, but like something like a correlation chart or like a heat map of the different features that you have and how they relate to the labels. And that just kind of gives you sort of the lay of the land, as well as doing the summary like metrics, right? And that's like the low hanging fruit effort. Yeah, pivot tables also, right? It's just any way where you can kind of get like a holistic look as to your data set. Now, in practice, in some like production settings, this is like dang near impossible, right? So if you're, for example, like Amazon, and you have these really, really huge tables, does it sort of make sense to have like hundreds of features like side by side to look at? Visually, you can't really, it's not always very useful, right? So that's where some packages like HighPlot, it's from Facebook, it looks at high dimensional data. That can be very, very useful. But that would be like the first step, right, is low hanging fruit. Then the second step I would do is looking at certain things like feature importances or other sort of statistical measures of what you already have. Then the third step I would do is the domain expertise and research that Monica talked about. Like, so for example, I'm currently working on a real estate startup, right? There's certain things where there are certain features that we can like sort of generate automatically, right? Let's say mortgage data. The day that someone signed a mortgage and like the day they paid it off, right? If you have some of these auto ML packages, they can quickly just like subtract the different date fields or whatever. But something that might be more meaningful, I mean, I'm not saying we have this data, right? But like if you're a Walmart and let's say you have some like awareness that, people who are, and this happened, right? People who are pregnant, if they are in like a certain stage, certain trimester, they start to get very sensitive to smell, right? Which means that their purchasing behavior is going to move to things that are like less smelly. So, less florals and all that, like scent neutral. That's something where, you could have actually picked that up from some of the consumer reports or some of the research publications. Now in that case, that happened accidentally, I think, that it came out publicly that they, could do stuff like that. But I would say like go first for the like understanding your data set and the features that you have and the relationships with them. Then go to, using like AutoML packages, not as like a standalone for feature engineering, but as an assistant tool. And then bring in the sort of domain expertise. After that point, when you've covered all those three, it really is just a matter of like evaluating your features and like how they contribute to the model.
That was wonderful. I really appreciate the comments from everybody. Got a lot of notes, and it's going to help me kind of think about how to approach these types of problems, and well, this type of problem, I guess.
Dave's
I want
got
to
some-
add that just real quick, Makiko, really loved that you added that about basically looking at correlation between the labels and those features. That's the first clue that you need to do feature engineering. Really glad you added.
So Dave, you got some great points in the chat about feature engineering. So let's hear you talk about that, and then after that, we'll go to Mark's question, and then we'll follow that up with Tor's question.
Yeah, so people can see what I wrote in the chat window for some resources about things. More generally, what I would say is if you're new to machine learning, if you're new to feature engineering in general, a couple of tips. One, domain expertise, especially in the business analytics space, there's no substitute for that. So if you don't know enough about the business and the business process, find somebody that does, and they will help you. Next up, and this might be a bit heretical, coming from me, not a shocker, avoid parametric methods. Focus on using non-parametric methods, like especially decision tree based models, because they are much easier to grok what's going on with your features vis-a-vis decision boundaries, why certain features are actually being picked and why some are not. I sound like a broken record, but there's nothing quite like the mighty random forest to start with, because underneath are just card trees, and card trees are very easy to understand how they use features that you engineer for decision boundaries, and then they're just aggregated up and made more powerful through a random forest. So those would be my my biggest suggestions. And the reason for non-parametric and decision tree based algorithms in particular is because it's very easy to use something like ggplot2, a data visualization framework, to actually say, hey, I'm going to create this feature, and then I can facet wrap it to give multiple dimensions at the same time and actually see, look, am I cleanly separating my prediction labels, for example? It becomes much easier to tie what you're doing in a visual way to how the algorithm might or might not use the feature that you engineer. And that's a very good way to get up to speed on feature engineering.
Absolutely love it, man. Great conversations. So let's move on to Mark's question. So Mark, go ahead, ask your question, and then I'm going to open this one up directly to Joe and Matt.
So this is kind of really focused question, but essentially my job is looking more and more like the engineers want to move towards MongoDB as kind of our kind of data structure. And they're still testing out and they're asking me a few questions, but specifically something I'm really interested in is ACID compliance with MongoDB. For kind of context, MongoDB is not a relational database, so things can get pretty wild for your data structures. And so one of the engineers asked me, I didn't have the question, so the answer, so I thought I'd come here, is, earlier it was known for having really poor ACID compliance. Now it says a little bit better, but I'm curious if others have any ideas on that, and what are kind of ways to mitigate kind of data becoming crazy in MongoDB?
Okay, well, Mongo's a good database. I would suppose, what's the rationale for choosing that over something like Postgres, which we talked about?
Yeah, we did talk about earlier. Now I need to go a little bit deeper now that they've kind of made a decision. Mm-hmm. I actually don't know why they don't want to go towards Postgres. I think the reasoning is probably because we're already in a NoSQL kind of setup. And then for context, we currently use Bigtable right now, which is Google setup.
I mean, I would say there's, from their standpoint, probably nothing wrong with using Mongo, especially if you're already using Bigtable for a database. So I guess one of my questions would be if you could just stick with Bigtable, and where does Mongo fit into the picture? But I assume assuming they've already thought through all these considerations,
Big tables for sure going away. I know that.
Right. Being replaced with Mongo. It's an interesting choice.
Yeah, or Postgres, but they're testing out Mongo right now and they really like it. So I'm probably gonna have to learn it.
There's a lot to like about Mongo. I think the temptation is, and again, for full disclosure, we actually partner with Mongo. So, and I think it's appropriate. It's an appropriate tool for certain use cases. They'll definitely sell you on the idea that it can be used for everything. My experience is sometimes relational databases are probably more appropriate. It depends on the scale of data you're talking about. Depends on the type of latency and lookups that you want to do, and a whole host of other things. ACID compliance also being one of them, right? So Postgres is tried and true with structural integrity and ACID compliance and everything else. I would say Mongo's, it's like a bear trap. It's really easy to get into. It might be harder to get out of. And so this comes from lots of years of production level of experience with Mongo and Postgres. I know of which I speak. And then from an analytics perspective, any downstream stuff, you're going to have to take that in consideration too. The fact that Mongo is schemaless also means that any downstream effects on analytics, you're going to have to think about that. Because you can basically throw anything to a Mongo collection, which also means you could potentially get anything out of a Mongo collection that isn't correctly defined. So that is a very big consideration.
Yeah, and then the push. So I definitely brought that up with them, and the pushback, and it kind of made sense to me, is that we use proto buffers, which is another Google specific thing. And for context, that it's a document based, so you have to just strictly state kind of what's the structure of your data that you're throwing in there. Would that essentially limit that kind of evil craziness with Mongo, or is there's still kind of a trouble with that?
I haven't really tried using protobufs with Mongo, so it's hard for me to say if there's some compatibility with the two. But if there is, then Mongo, still inherently with Mongo, it's the good and bad of it is you can put anything in there, right? So yeah, that's always where I see people going wrong with Mongo, is they're like, oh, we can just put everything in here, and it's like, yeah, that's exactly why it might be a problem for you too, because the temptation, and trust me, I've rescued several companies from this too, where it's migrating off of Mongo to Postgres for precisely the reason that data started not making sense after a while. Like you're trying to do aggregations, and it's just somehow the way they had it structured did not line up at all. So I would just say, like, make sure that whoever's implementing they're communicating with you in terms if they add new data in that maybe is not expected. So.
Yeah, and on the ACID issue, I would say that someone on your team needs to become a Mongo expert. I mean, there have been many startups destroyed by Mongo, and it was because of misconfigurations and bad code, basically. Like, you can essentially make Mongo ACID compliant, but you have to make sure that all the configs are set correctly and that the commits are handled correctly by your application. And so someone on your team really needs to do that research, understand the gotchas, understand how code works. And then, you need code reviews to make sure that those commits are happening correctly as new code comes in, to make everything safe. The trick with Mongo is that, like a lot of things that in terms of data coherence that a traditional relational database would do for you, you now have to do as the software developer. And so you've got to have gatekeeping on certain types of commits that could screw up the data structure.
Super helpful.
Sorry, but also making sure that in different Mongo collections and documents that you can refer IDs. So for you as a data scientist or data analyst, the last thing you want is to have all these disparate Mongo collections that you can't reconcile back to each other, right? That's a huge, huge one. I would be making sure that if they're going to be structuring their data, to Matt's point, that this is being really well thought through beforehand. Because otherwise what you're going to find is, if there's no way to bridge the data, then there's no way, you're kind of SOL at that point. So that said, it's a great database. You should check it out.
super helpful. There's some really great stuff I can bring back to them as they're trying to make all these kind of considerations and the final decision on the fate of how I deal with their data.
I mean, the saving grace is, I figure, if they're experienced or hardcore enough to use protobufs, then they should be able to figure this out, because that's an order of magnitude more complex than Mongo. So let me know how it goes.
Well, we'll do.
That was definitely an enlightening conversation. I hope you guys took a lot away from that. I know I did. So I got a question here. So when people talk about saving their models to a Postgres database, like how does that work? What does that mean? Can you demystify that for us? Either Joe, Matt.
By models, like a machine learning model or like a data model?
Yeah, like a machine learning model.
Normally, so maybe there's some miscommunication. I wouldn't recommend storing it in the model or in a database. I would maybe the results of a model, like if you had like an output, you need to do fast lookup on a output of a model, then that would probably work really well. But yeah, if it's like saving like the actual like you know,
binaries
pickle file or something, or yeah, the protobuf, I wouldn't recommend doing it that way. But yeah, save it in object store, maybe have a pointer in your database to that object.
Okay.
But yeah, hopefully it alleviates confusion. So
Yeah.
models it's a kind of a ubiquitous term these days. It means a lot of things.
Yeah, I was reading some articles and people were talking about how they're saving their model binaries to Postgres databases, and I was like, I don't understand how this works. So yeah,
that seems like lunacy, but whatever you're into.
Yeah, definitely not doing that myself. Cool, man. Well, Mark, was that helpful for you?
1000%. I
Awesome,
really
man.
appreciate the insights from here.
Right on. So let's go now to Tor Rorvik. Is Tor still here? Yes, you are.
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Perfect. First of all, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to join the group. And I have to be very honest with you guys. I have absolutely no idea about 90% of the time that you talk, especially when you're talking about specific software solutions and I don't know, whatever it is. But I do get a lot of the principles that are being mentioned. Right now, I'm developing an online platform, which is for the audit community in the oil and gas industry. And as part of that, there is a lot of collection of data scheduled planned. The tool is just starting, but in the long term, there will be a lot of data collected. Now, one of the biggest challenges I have, I got 37 people that are just testing and using it now. And we are running just by going through one of the tools of one of the reports. I have probably about 30 to 40 reports saved for each of the stages and the history, etc. And the challenge I am starting to realize is that how am I going to manage all this data and ML and AI and all of these fancy things? I see that that is something that I'm going to need. And my question is really, what do I need to consider while I'm developing this? Because the ML is not going to be implemented yet, but what do I need to consider now with regards to how I structure, how I set it up, and also with the tables and databases? Are there things that I need to consider now so that I don't face huge challenges in the future when I'm planning on implementing machine learning? That's the question I have.
It's a good question. I'd love to know the answer to this one as well. Matt, I see you typed something out there. So if you want to, so let's hear from Matt, and then the classification guru, if you'd like to jump in as well.
I'll just ask up front, like, what kind of data are you talking about? I think one of the biggest things we see is that people don't structure data appropriately for analytics, especially if they come from a web application background. So I worked at a company in my early days where we were doing, basically with a company focused on data and analytics, but we were using a row-based Postgres database, which is generally an inappropriate choice for data that's going to scale. That's one of the most common mistakes because web developers tend to know about row-based databases like Postgres. And so that's their go-to. But you really, it pays to figure out what your data scale is going to be in a couple of years, and then choose a database that's going to be able to scale to that level easily. Unfortunately, there are a lot of nice solutions out there that are just turnkey. You still have to do your homework and develop the expertise, but you can talk to the community and kind of find out what's out there and then choose an appropriate solution early on.
Just to give you a quick answer to that, basically there's two types of data we're talking about. One is financial transactional data, which going to be a separate module that's going to be analyzing Benford theories and all of these things and structured. This is based on VBS structure, SAP, Oracle, different systems, which is going to feed in, which need to be standardized. And this is something I'm developing. The other side of the story, of course, is the soft. When you're doing audits in the industry, you're collecting a lot of words, basically, which is linked to the data, to the financial data. And this is where I'm starting to see a huge channel, because what I'm trying to achieve is that with machine learning, when people are actually doing and performing and collecting, you will actually be able to match the soft data, like the text data, versus the financial data. So if I'm analyzing the supplier, well, the data that you will be analyzing, the transactional data, will then be linked. Now, it is impossible for me as a person or individuals to actually manage that amount of data. On one audit, for example, that I performed, we had about 3 million lines of transactions, which had to be split up because Excel had its limitations. But that's just the transaction lines. And then you have on the other side, which is the soft, when you're doing the analysis, you need to review contracts. Ultimately, I want to have a system also where it goes through the contract, finds the key parameters. And I know there are software out there that exists today that does that, but then that's going to be linked up to the financial transaction analysis. Now we're talking long term, but ultimately this is. And my concern now is that by building the data databases, I just want to make sure that I'm not going to have to kind of restart everything in the future when you start implementing. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah, it does. And I think in this case, the data you're talking about may not actually be that large. How much per month, how much data would you estimate that you're accumulating? Typically, you start to see really big data if you're getting into event-based data, like every click on a website, every event that happens on a website, then your data just blows up. To be quite honest, you could probably park this data inside of a cloud data warehouse, one of these options where you don't have to pay to have it turned on all the time, like a Snowflake or a BigQuery, or even in like a cloud storage object-based store solution. And then to your point, I think the key consideration afterward is just making sure that you have some kind of nice keys that will match the data up. And then you can go back and begin to dig into it later when you have that capability. So. Are you restricted to on-prem for some reason, or can you go to cloud solutions?
Cloud solutions, but also the restriction may be by some of the companies and clients, but you still need to have some sort of a link into the system itself or the cloud-based solution. That is the plan in the long term, and it's built as a standalone program as well. So. But the data-wise, I'm sure we're not talking the click approach amount of data, but we're certainly going to be collecting a lot of data and doing a lot of financial analysis and comparison between region, countries, both horizontal evaluations and vertical. It goes in all directions. So like I said, right now I'm still able to manage in Excel in my pivot tables. Which I kind of I brought that to the limit a long time ago, but I'm not ready to kind of go further. That's why I'm developing the tool, and I believe the market is there to receive it, basically.
That totally makes sense. Yeah, I would say in some respects, the data market has kind of moved on from data lakes. Data lakes still serve a lot of purposes, but for structured data, we tend to put that into larger databases now. But raw text data is actually a great use case for a data lake. And so I think putting it into an object store like Amazon S3 would be great. You just need to think about how it's organized so that when you come back to it in a year or two, you can actually find things. That's the biggest problem with data lakes. They easily turn into data swamps because you still need a schema in the sense of like hierarchical organization that will allow you to find something in the future. Otherwise, you're just going to have a huge mess on your hands. You won't be able to find anything.
And that's the thing. But just one more follow-up on that, because when you mentioned about the large data, et cetera, is it possible for ML solutions to actually find equalities between data sets in different countries, for example? I mean, if you have SAP as one system and that Oracle's now accounting, is it possible to develop something that can actually analyze and find things that are connected or similar, and then bring that forward to kind of my attention so I can evaluate it and say yes and no type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that might actually be a good use case for something like Spark to basically scan a lot of this data and figure out kind of what your features are, what your keys are that you're looking up on, even to the point where you could do some NLP type solutions. There are a lot of nice like packages in Spark for NLP.
Just wind up a little bit, the NIP you said?
NLP, natural language processing.
Ah, there we go. I'm with you.
Text, featurizing the text in various ways.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. So hopefully that was helpful, Tor.
Very helpful. Very good.
Awesome. So next question is, we're going to go to John. John has a question about Transformers. So I wonder who wants to take that one on. So John, go for it.
Hi, thank you. So just to give a bit of context, I'm doing a project at the minute where I'm looking at Reddit data. And what I'm doing is I'm pulling Reddit data and using HDB scan to cluster that data. And after that, I'm using a transformer, or I think it's a neural network actually. So it's the Facebook BART CNN. I'm using that to summarize those clusters. So the problem I'm running into here is obviously the clusters of posts are massive now, right? So like the BART CNN can analyze up to 1,024 characters, I believe. So what I'm finding is when I look at those clusters and I look at the summaries, they're kind of just biased to the top of the cluster. So I was just wondering, does anybody know of any kind of natural language understanding models or tools or transformers that can deal with large bodies of text?
Tom, you're the Transformers guy. I'm bouncing this to you, and then after that, we'll see Makiko has.
So I'm a Transformers passionate student who's super lucky to be friends with Dennis Rothman, the real guru of Transformers. And first question, John, have you bought his book? Because it is released now.
I haven't bought a book, no.
Okay, I would highly recommend that you buy that book. Transformers are on the leaderboards now. They've passed up RNNs, LSTMs. They definitely train faster with more parameters. They can beat CNNs, I think, all the time. I don't know for sure on that one. But the best thing about them, John, is they are really good at transfer learning. So you can literally go get GPT-2 and you can transfer learn it. Now, then's the question, which transformer do you want to apply transfer learning to? Or do you want to create your own transformer and train it, which is possible. Would you mind repeating just in a summary fashion again? I've missed a little bit on your description of the task you're trying to achieve.
Okay, so what I'm trying to achieve, or what I've actually done is I've got posts from Reddit. So I've got lots of Reddit data, right? And I'm using
it's textual though, right? You're doing text.
It's text data. So yeah, sorry, yeah, this is text data. So Reddit, it's just like posts. So I've got data consisting of a post. It tells you the title and the body of the post. I've cleaned this with natural language processing. So I'm looking at the bodies of the posts now. And what I've done is I've applied HTTP scan to cluster those posts into similar categories and grouped those posts by category. And I'm applying not a transformer, I'm applying a CNN. So it's the BART, the Facebook CNN. So I'm applying that at the cluster level to summarize that text so I can get an intuition of what's kind of happening under each cluster, right? So I did use I think it was the T5 transformer before. So this is pre-trained. These models are all pre-trained. I used the T5 transformer before, but it maxed out at like 512 characters. the pre-trained version. So there's an option to kind of truncate. There's an option to like truncate what's being read in. But
when you say the 512, first of all, let me back up with what you're saying just a little bit. Are you trying to do a cluster analysis of some kind on the comments? Are you trying to do a classification?
So I've already done that. So I've already done the classification. I've built my clusters, and I'm rolling the bodies. So you have a text body and a text title, right? So if you, just to step back, if you post something on Reddit, the post has a title and then there's a body of text following that post. I'm interested in the body of text following that post, and I'm interested in kind of grouping those together in clusters for different posts. So there could be like 1,000, 4,000, 5,000 different posts. The assumption is there are going to be some posts on this subject that are similar. So I'm using the HTTP scan to group those together. I've got my clusters. I then roll those up into, I roll the text associated with each cluster into one thing and then apply the transformer on that. But as you can imagine, that kind of cluster level text is quite big now. So most of the pre-trained transformers kind of max out at like 512 characters. And this is for text summarization.
I think, and forgive me if I'm wrong here. And by the way, if you have made a conceptual error with the 512, I want you to know I completely sympathize. So
okay, but
my concern is when you say the 512, you mean the number of characters coming in?
Yeah. So
okay, that let me just help you there. A word embedding is a fancy way to take your vocabulary and the sentences you have coming in, and map it to a hyperspace. So the 512 is the number of dimensions they've used for the word embedding. You've got that.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did you use to embed the input wording?
I used another transformer to embed to basically take that and vectorize it. So it could, so there's a process I use to take that body of text and vectorize it, right?
And by the way, I think you were just, terminology is still dirty in data science. So it was just a terminology struggle there for probably both of us. So I think my only concerns from listening to you, and it may just be that I don't understand you, is that pre-classification you're doing. It sounds like, well, why wouldn't you just have the transformer do that? It seems like you're doing something you want the transformer to do. Are you trying to train it? Are you trying to train it further? Are you trying to use those classifications to do some additional transfer learning?
No, I'm not. So the classifications are basically to pick out topics, right? So
right.
So
you want the transformer to recognize those topics, though, right?
So I've kind of already got that part down. So I've already got that part down where, and I think it is a transformer I'm using. I should pull up my code just to see. So
where I'm getting lost, and Harpreet, you be the gatekeeper whether John and I should take this offline. Thank you. It's just that it sounds, I may be missing something, but it sounds like you want the transformer to do this categorization or classification, but yet you have a thing that's doing it ahead of time. So that's where I'm getting, what do you want the transformer to do versus what you've already done ahead of time?
So am I right in saying that transformers can be used for different tasks, right? So you can use transformers if you want to cluster or categorize, and you can use transformers to translate, or you can use transformers to summarize. So I've got everything up to the clusters. It's now just because the clusters are so massive, and as you said, like when you like vectorize the body of text using, I'm using a convolutional neural network right now to summarize that text, but because it's so big, I'm past the kind of dimension limits for that network, and there isn't anything bigger. So there isn't anything bigger I can find, because when I did my research, quite a few people had run into the same problem. So it was like 1,024 characters, I think, was I keep saying characters, but you know what I mean. It was
dimensionality.
Embeddings, 1,024 was the max.
So that's basically your dimensions.
Yes.
That's the dimensions of your embedding. So still what I'm confused on, John, I think if we get around this, we can get to your answer fairly easily. It sounds like you've used a CNN to create these 4 categories. I'll say what did you call them? I'm sorry.
No, so I didn't use the CNN to cluster. I used a pre-trained bot Facebook CNN.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was pre-trained to summarize the text after I've already formed the clusters. The clusters are formed already, no problem.
So basically, the Facebook bot's already done this clustering. Now, what do you want the transformer to do? Because really, by the way, yeah, transformers are the bomb. That's great. It'd be fun to know how to use it. But it sounds like you've already got this Facebook bot to do the clustering. Did you want to use that data to train a transformer to go further?
No, so I don't. I think I've miscommunicated that. It's the Facebook bot is the model, the pre-trained model I'm using to do the summarization. So when I say summary of a text, it's taking a large body of text and condensing it down into a smaller paragraph, with some kind of, so you can get the overall kind of, you can get a summary of that text. So it's yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I've kind of explained it badly. The cluster's already there. I have no problem generating the clusters. It's then building the summary on those clusters. I'm running into issues because there aren't, from what I can see, there aren't really any available models that like can do summaries on large bodies of text yet.
I think you. Well, sorry. I think now that I've heard you, and we may need to take this one offline, but I do think a transformer could summarize your clusters, and it could be that an existing transformer model without any additional transfer learning could do it.
Okay.
Based on I'm still a newbie to transformers, but based on what I've learned and what you've described, that's where they kick ass, to summarize something like that. And I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but I'm happy after the show, you and I can connect, and I can do a quick search on Dennis's book since you don't have it yet. And I can tell you which model's good at doing that. And I think it's one of the ones that you can get a hold of. The only one that's really hard to make use of off the cloud is GPT-3. The others are pretty darn near freely shared. So there's hope for you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely.
Let's hear from Curtis, because I know he's got some insight into some NLP stuff. I know he's really into this. By the way, Curtis, this is like the Curtis whose episode was released today on the podcast.
It was today?
Yeah.
Oh. I didn't know.
Hi, Curtis.
Hello. Oh, hello, Tom. How you doing, John? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, Curtis. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. What came to mind straight away, I don't know if you've heard of it or if you've tried it, is locative sensitive hashing.
No, I haven't heard of it.
Okay, so it's just like doing a search in a subspace, but it's just because what I'm thinking is that with a transformer model, the attention part of it would now process against every single word. If I'm conceptually saying it right, it would process against every single word, and it just might be running into a memory overload. But what the locality sensitive hashing will do, it will divide the embeddings into subspaces and then do searches of the subspaces to find the most relative words in that subspace.
Yeah.
So subspaces that are further away wouldn't necessarily need to be processed because it's not relevant. But I don't know if I'm explaining it very well. In fact, I know I'm not. But
I think I get what you're saying, and it does make sense, because I tried it with so before I used the Facebook bot CNN, I used what a pre-trained, I think it's called the T5. It's Google's transformer. And what I found was, because the embeddings, the kind of max embeddings was like 512, it just focused on literally the top of the body of text. So when I checked the summary against the entire body of text, I could see that it just picked out a few kind of sentences from the top, and obviously it didn't summarize as I was expecting. So I get what you're saying. I think that type of thing does make sense. So what did you say was locality sensitive hashing? Okay, I'm gonna check it out. And Thomas, I'm gonna reach out to you as well to see if there's any kind of models that you know of that can deal with large bodies of text.
Quite frankly, just from your description, it sounds like the way you're tokenizing before you embed is breaking.
Okay.
It's just not reading all the text. I would hunt for somewhere in your code to see where that might be going wrong. Do you kind of agree, Curtis?
So I missed the last bit. I was reading a comment.
Oh, sure. I was just saying, from his description, if it's not embedding all that text, it sounds like there's just some kind of error in his tokenization scheme that's not getting all the text and embedding it all from the way he's talking.
That could also possibly be one. That could.
Yeah, I know that. I definitely had that issue when I was using the T5 for sure. I definitely had that issue, and that's why I kind of decided not to go with that transformer, and I moved on to the bot. But like, yeah, the T5 was definitely a lot faster. It wasn't working as it should have done, but it was definitely 100% faster than the bot. So that's positive.
That's some good discussions for all the NLP fans listening. That was pretty damn insightful. Thank you guys so much for going deep on that. John, by the way, if you want to do this project not on Reddit posts, but on the text transcripts of the Artists of Data Science podcast, let me know. I can make that happen for you.
Awesome.
I think that might be a much more interesting project than Reddit. I'm just saying, man.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm gonna reach out.
Yeah,
Awesome.
reach out to me, man. Next up, we got Tomas. I hope I'm saying your name right. There's a lot of accents on the A and the S.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Tomas. Yeah, but
how's it go, man? Go for it.
Slow. Yeah, all right. So my question is about how do you actually serve your models? Like, what's the best practice, right? So for models that run on cloud, it's probably easy. The API works well. But my question is mostly for the models that run on the edge devices, right? The edge deployment. Basically, I have a model that analyzes 20 pictures each minute, so it wouldn't make sense to send everything to the cloud and analyze it there. So, like, what's the main practice? Do you actually have a local API, either with a Flask or fast API, or do you run dirty code in just plain Python, or basically, I'm asking because I recently switched fields, so the imposter syndrome is real. So I'm not sure what's the best practice to serve the models.
Trust me, man, imposter syndrome is real every single goddamn day for me. I mean, I'd love to hear from I think maybe Joe or Matt probably has a lot of experience with this, because I've got zero experience deploying to edge devices.
I sadly don't really have anything with edge devices either. So I don't know if you've dorked out an EdgeML
Not really, I've got to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that should be a weekend project one of these days, but with a couple of phones or something. But I'd love to hear from someone who's done it with a lot of devices. Yeah. We have a client who's working with edge devices, but we're just getting started with them. Maybe we can collect some insights from them and bring someone on the show or something like this.
That would be freaking awesome, man. I'd love to learn more about that. Anybody here have any experience deploying to edge devices? No. If anybody has links or resources that could help Tomasz out, please go ahead and share those right there into the chat.
Hey, Matt, I remember our friend, he was using the Coral Edge device. That looked pretty cool. Might be something to try out, but
yeah. We'll try to recruit some more people.
I think it had an onboard TPU on it too, which is kind of cool. So
yeah, definitely, man. That'd be awesome. Greg, you have a suggestion here that might help?
Yeah, I was talking. When Tomasz was talking, I was thinking about the same thing that federated learning is trying to do, right? Which is having a localized model on the cloud, and you deploy sub models to the edge devices that learns from the device and sends those parameters to the centralized model in the cloud. And so it gets the average output from all of these devices to this centralized cloud model. So I was thinking whether federated learning, if you look into that, Thomas, maybe you might find how they're deploying these models to the devices to help learn from this data on the edge without compromising personnel data. So there are a couple of papers I can share with you on this one.
I've got a paper here by Yan Zhang and Matthew Salveras from Microsoft called Deploying Machine Learning Models on the Edge. It's from October 2019. I can post that right here into the channel. Hopefully that's helpful if it's something you haven't already come across. Hopefully that could help you with the journey. And there's another one here by heartbeat.fritz.ai about machine learning models on edge and mobile.
Into it.
Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you.
Right on, man. If anybody else has questions, now is the time, my friends.
Actually, one quick comment. In terms of like learning sort of best practices in the whole imposter syndrome, I'd recommend looking at full stack deep learning. They have like an online course website that goes over just sort of like the end-to-end training and training, deployment, evaluation, and all that. And then I'd also consider too, like in terms of serving predictions or serving models, like whether you actually need to like, do you basically need to train the model on the device, or do you just need to like actually serve the predictions? Because if you need to train them on the device, like Apple does have some ML libraries that you would use with Swift, and you can also look at TensorFlow Lite, I think. So those are like two potential libraries, but I would definitely recommend looking at full stack deep learning. Joe Rice and Matt, I think you guys, it was the Utah meetup where Josh Tobin was talking. It wasn't specific.
Yeah, Utah did an engineering meetup a few weeks ago. Josh gave a exceptionally great talk. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would, also look up that talk too, not necessarily because it deals with edge computing, but it's still talking about best practices. Because I think like it becomes easier to sort of evaluate like what solutions you really need when you first off understand kind of like what end-to-end would look like for sort of your products or models that you're working for. And then also like being able to ask yourself, like, do you like certain things, for example, like what's the latency and what's sort of the privacy around the data that's being handled in the mobile app? Because for example, if it is really secure data, that's like PII or whatever, definitely, like to Greg's suggestion, like look up federated learning, because that's sort of like how that area kind of developed in response to that question of like, well, what do we do with like personal information that we don't want to be sending back and forth? But also really consider whether you need to even like leverage TensorFlow Lite or any of the other libraries. It could just be that, you just like have like the prediction saved, and then it's just like pulled through like a query or request like to a model that's like served on cloud. So that would be my recommendation.
I would say also, I posted a link to Josh's talk. I find it was interesting for a few reasons. It was a really good look at production ML, but I think Josh also unveiled something which he called the evaluation store, which if he's right, this has a really good chance of completely transforming the landscape of production ML. And I believe this was the first time he talked about it. So it's worth checking out. It was really good. So thanks for giving a shout out to that, by the way. So,
definitely add that to my list, and I'll be sure to spam that out to the newsletter as well. I'm looking forward to digging into this.
Cool.
So full stack deep learning, what is this? Can you give us a little bit more detail on this?
Yeah, so Josh and a few other researchers in the area, they're teaching a class. It was more of like a kind of a crash course boot camp thing at Berkeley. And so they talked about just all the different aspects of production machine learning and deep learning. And now they actually have a follow-on course going on right now, actually, at Berkeley. I think it's a full semester course now. So, but pretty much what it is a deep dive into all the different facets you need to consider when you're trying to do production machine learning. And I think it's the best resource out there right now. Well, it's one of the only resources out there right now. So,
yeah, but the nice thing is that so they have a course website that has like last year's videos. It's pretty comprehensive. They have a bunch of guest speakers that talk through like different use cases. But also too, so they have like a live Berkeley one going on. That one's closed, and it was like Berkeley Extension, but they have an online one where it's a bunch of us are doing like the course where you get project feedback and all that. But if you're not doing that, they will post videos for free, and also the labs and also the PowerPoint slides, and they'll really go through like different areas like deployment, like evaluation, what is the structure of like a data science machine learning team. It really, like if I had to make a list of like the 5 resources of all time, like for anyone who is like considering to be like a practicing professional in data science, machine learning, analytics, whatever, that would be hands down like the resource I would recommend. So it's full stack deep learning. If you just Google the term, you'll be able to find it. And I think the like asynchronous like online course where they post the videos is starting March 1st.
Right on, man. That's really, really awesome. Definitely gonna be digging into that. Thank you very much. Next up, we got the one and only Greg Kokio.
All right, so I'm constantly thinking about how to do things a little bit faster at work. And it takes a group of 20 a long time to produce paper out, because you have to go to your data, you have to make a case for it. And one of the best way at Amazon to convince folks with an idea is not only to write a quick paper about your vision, but also to come up with a, I guess, scrappy solution. And one of the things I'm trying to build right now is a chatbot. So I wanted to see if anybody had I'm in the compliance industry, and chatbots to me will be quick for people in compliance who are trying to find quick answers about their data, the performance of their products. And so they don't have to go to a centralized BI team for answers that would take, month of prioritization. And I feel like a chatbot can give me answers a little bit fast. And I don't know if anyone has built anything like that before. I just want a scrappy solution where maybe I have 20 to 50 questions on a Excel sheet that I can link to this chatbot and answer questions to showcase what this thing can do. But my gold star is having something that can even fetch links, that can take you to the direct answer or produce like a PDF Anybody has done anything with chatbots, especially with AWS chatbots, built it before, could guide me on how to quickly put something together?
If anybody's got any tips, definitely go for it.
I made one of the first Alexa apps back in the day, and it's still running. I would say it's gotten a lot easier since then. So I don't know what you've tried. What have you tried so far or thought of?
So I've read things about the chat. So Alexa, to me, when I hear Alexa, I hear kind of voice activated, but it's more like a text activated that I'm looking for. So I didn't think Alexa was appropriate, because at some point, if you're in the office, I can see where a voice activated tool can be annoying to somebody, to your neighbor.
Actually.
Yeah, so I looked into AWS chatbot. It's just that it's gibberish to me so far. Just we need to skip corners to see if anybody has touched on it, played with it before, and tell me how to kind of put something very scrappy together. Maybe if you can answer 10 questions, I'm happy with that, because that can help me make a case for the business to go forward with it, with a tool like that. It's just that something that we don't think about in compliance, because most people, they're not, they're not versed in data, right? In analytics. But when it comes to legal paperwork, putting things together, they're good at this. Lots of wordings, lots of words. But when it comes to, let's go get the numbers, then it takes, a while for the BI team to put these things together for us. And I feel like I'm trying to reduce that time, that churn. So that was my purpose for this.
Got a link here to a notebook that's a generative chatbot that might be helpful to you. And then there's another one here called Deep Pavlov. And it's a pattern matching chatbot with the Deep Pavlov framework, which is a open source conversational AI framework. So I'll go ahead and I'll add that link right there as well. In the meantime, if anybody has direct experience working on this stuff, I know Greg would definitely appreciate that. And here's another notebook for a tutorial on how to create a chatbot. So I'm hoping these might be helpful. So this last one is from Matthew Inkowicz. If you just type into Google, everybody listen at home, Matthew Inkowicz chatbot tutorial. It's pretty comprehensive, and it looks like it might be helpful. Should get you started in the right direction.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah. If anybody else has.
I just wanted to ask Greg. Greg, how sophisticated do you want the chatbot?
Just very simple. Ask questions. Ask me, say, if you think about right now, a list of 10 to 20 questions with their answers, showcase that the chatbot can give you that answer quite fast. That would give somebody who's not thinking about this, I just want to spark an idea with my teammates that these informations, we can get them faster if we put some money together to build technology around it, and not have to rely on a centralized BI team to query the solution for us, which could take a month. Depends on how much they have in the backlog, because they do have a lot of other customers to respond to.
So I put in the chat, a good friend of mine in Indonesia, he has a chat bot that may be a tool. I'm sorry, he has a chat bot in his landing page that answers questions about him. And from the way you're describing it, that might be a good starting point to look at and consider among these other things that were shared with you also.
That's right. I know, Luis. Yes, thank you, Tom.
Craig, I just have a quick comment on that, because what you're talking about now is specifically something that I would like to implement in my concept. And as an example, technically what it means is just that as an auditor, I could type in how can I verify blah, 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 and etc. Now, what I'd like the machine learning or how it's gathering is basically to go into all the data and pick out, okay, where to look, what to look for, okay, what's historical information, and then summarize that and bring back the answer, either, as you said, PDF format or link it in. The tool that I've developed now is actually generating, quote unquote, automatically a audit work program for the auditor. So you go through a set of questions, you raise and rank or risk assess, and based on the results, then you just basically generate and you have your work program. Now, the work programs will then initially be empty. Okay, I'm providing them with what to do, how to do, what information to ask for, et cetera, to the auditee. But in time, when you're actually working on it, you will start adding where you got the information, what information you got, what regulations did you use, et cetera, to build up your case as to a finding. Now, the idea then, of course, is when you come back, it's then imports all of this, upstates everything, and again feeds back in. And this particular issue that you're raising now is clearly something that I think has a huge potential, especially if I'm sitting on an audit and I'm by myself and I'm trying to figure out what to do. I can just ask, and then technically the system will generate some suggestions of what to do, how to do. It won't do the job for me, but at least it will make my life a lot easier. Simplify it, just like you want to simplify. I'm a lazy guy. That's why things get invented. That's my theory.
Exactly. And my laziness takes me here to see if I could cut some corners about, somebody who might have worked on, Amazon tools before and know how to put this together so I don't have to read so many papers and things like that.
Like I've always said, is that if it wasn't for laziness, they wouldn't have invented the wheel.
Exactly. So I know I'm pretty happy about QuickSight because recently they released something called QuickSight Q, where you can build a dashboard and then you can use natural language to ask questions about the data. Tell me where I can see from this period that, things went wrong and why and things like that. Then it translates that to a response within the dashboard. So, which is something a lot of business folks are excited about. But not everything needs a QuickSight. Yes, go ahead, Joe.
At Amazon, do they give you the ability to use the AWS tools, or?
It depends how expensive. So my department might not have enough money to afford, right? So we all have a budget. So if we can build the tool internally with our tech teams, with our software engineers, it's probably better than just using AWS. It depends. Some solutions are good with AWS too, because AWS is just like a third-party company for us. We have to, it's kind of like a utility bill, like anything else. So we have to budget for it. And when new ideas come in, you might not necessarily have budgeted for that. And you have to figure out the scrappiest way of doing it. And if AWS is the answer, we go with it. So, but they're always open for us to leverage.
Okay, no, that's good insight. Do you guys, would the interface be something like Chime or Slack, or like what would the interface be to this chatbot?
I would say something like this, something like Slack or something. Now, here's the advantage. I'm glad you asked. Because we now have Slack, AWS is embeddable into Slack nowadays, and I've seen people doing it too. So that could be another avenue where I could create a Slack channel for my team, for my group, and then figure out a way to have AWS chatbot speak to it. So that could be another avenue too. It's just the how that I'm fighting with.
I'm in my AWS console right now, just actually looking at this, and they have the AWS chatbot for AWS that you can configure it for Chime or Slack. And so if you have Slack, that might be the first place I'd look, honestly. We kind of did this back in the day at one company I was at. We were building Slack commands to get reports and queries. So because we're dorks, I guess.
I almost fight too, Mickey. Yes.
Once you have a way of configuring, I suppose what you need to do is figure out, okay, so this phrase is going to match with this query, right, against the database. And after that, I'm sure it's improved a lot since then. I'm going to be curious if you try out QuickSight Q. I'm very curious your feedback on that. So.
Yeah. So the dashboards we have, there's so many people who rely on it, or I just have to build a case to leverage QuickStart. It's launched through AWS, but our group haven't leveraged it yet. I've used some sort of natural language before through Power BI, and it's been there for at least 2 years now, and I liked it, so I know the power it has, and I am yet to make a case for changing our current dashboards through QuickStart yet, but I know QuickStart is something that would be very useful for our business partners as well.
Right on. I was going to say, like, the most scrappy chatbot I can think of would be like a fuzzy string matching and just have tuples, like, of commonly asked questions. And yeah, that's just because,
Right.
Cool. Thank you, team.
On at the startup incubator, if I can get you some AWS credits. Startup incubator. Yes, I might know someone.
Sounds good, Mikiko. I'm gonna have to hit you up soon.
All right, guys. Well, let's go ahead and let's call this one a day. Thank you so much for hanging out, guys. Be sure to check out the interview I did release today. It was with Curtis Pikes, who is here. I think he dropped off, but it was an excellent interview. He's got a very interesting backstory. So definitely check that interview out. Later on this month, I think it might even be in 2 weeks, I've got Greg's episode releasing. So keep an eye out for that one. So excited for that, guys. So take care. Have a good night. Remember, you got one life on this planet. Why not try to do something big, y'all? Peace.